that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech at Davos sounded powerful, intellectual, and even brave. He spoke about a rupture in the world order, about middle powers needing honesty, and about how the so-called rules-based international order is fading. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Carney's speech is not nearly as honest as it claims to be. In fact, it quietly rewrites history. Carney keeps invoking the idea of a rules-based international order. He admits it was imperfect, but still treats it as something real, something we lost recently. The problem is simple. The world was never truly rules-based. Long before Donald Trump, long before today's trade wars and sanctions, the global system was already deeply unequal and selective. Think about Iraq in 2003. The United States and its allies invaded without clear UN authorization. Hundreds of thousands of civilians died. The country collapsed. No one was held accountable. Think about Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya. According to major academic studies, the so-called war on terror alone has killed well over 1 million people directly and indirectly. That's not a rules-based system. That's raw power dressed up as legality. And outside the Middle East, look at Africa. For decades, more money has left Africa through illicit financial flows than entered through aid and investment. Corporations extract, elites offshore wealth, and global institutions protect capital, not people. So when Carney talks about a lost golden age of global rules, the real question is, rules for whom? Because for much of the global south, this order meant war, debt, extraction, and structural dependency. So why does Carney emphasize the rules-based order now? Because it's politically useful. It allows Western countries to say, the system used to be fair, but now it's broken because of bad actors. It shifts blame away from the structural reality, that Western power always bent the rules when convenient and reframes today's crisis as an accident, not the logical outcome of decades of selective enforcement. In other words, rules-based order isn't a description, it's a branding strategy. It preserves moral authority while the same countries massively expand military spending, weaponize trade, and restructure supply chains for geopolitical competition. Carney also avoids the biggest geopolitical reality of our time, the strategic divorce between Europe and the United States. For decades, Europe free-rode on American security. NATO was effectively underwritten by US taxpayers, US weapons, and US power. Now that's ending. Not because Europe suddenly became independent, but because the US itself is becoming more inward-looking, more transactional, and less willing to subsidize others. Trump did not create this trend. He just made it visible. Europe is being forced to rearm not out of idealism, but because the American security guarantee is no longer unconditional. Carney talks about middle powers acting together, but the deeper truth is harsher. The old Atlantic bargain is breaking down, and no amount of Davos rhetoric can reverse that. Now compare Carney's speech with Xi Jinping's address at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in September 2025. Xi talks about sovereign equality, non-interference, and uniform application of international law. He frames global governance as something dominated by a few powerful states imposing house rules. Carney and Xi actually agree on one thing: economic integration is being used as a weapon. But their strategies diverge. Xi pushes for a multipolar world led by coalitions of non-Western states. Carney pushes for new coalitions of like-minded democracies, anchored in the G7 and Western institutions. Same diagnosis, different camps. Xi wants to rewrite the system. Carney wants to manage it without losing Western leadership. So what does all this tell us? Mark Carney is right about one thing. The world is in rupture. But he's wrong about where that rupture came from. This is not the collapse of a fair system. It's the collapse of a system that always relied on unequal power, selective rules, and moral double standards. What we're witnessing now isn't the death of a rules-based order. It's the moment when the world finally stops pretending it ever truly existed. And the new international order will not be constructed on nostalgia, rhetoric, or symbolic narratives. It will be constructed on economic, technological, and military power, and on evolving alliance structures.